Hi class, today we are looking at human resource management, and we are looking at it within the hospitality and tourism sector, and we're focusing on questions 3, 4 and 6. As normal, we're going to look at breaking down the questions from 3 to 6 and then look at evaluating or reviewing the keywords within the questions, as it's most important to understand the question before you can answer it. Then we're going to be looking at the assignment brief suggested format that has been provided, and then looking at the tasks and the evaluation and conclusions. Let's first start with the questions. Question 1 says to adapt functions of human resource management in tourism and or hospitality organizations. So adapt functions. So we have to know what the functions are within the tourism and hospitality sector. Next question is to critically assess the strategic contribution of human resource management to business success. So critically assess the strategic contribution of human resource management to business success. The third question is assess the requirements of quality management schemes in human resource management. So assess the requirements of quality management schemes in human resource management. I suppose there we're looking at total quality management, continuous improvement, just in time type quality type processes. So if we're looking at the key words in the questions, in the first question the key word was to adapt, and that means to make something suitable for a new use. So adapt, to change it and make it suitable for a new use. The next keywords are critically assess in the next question, meaning you must provide your opinion or verdict on whether an argument or a set of research findings is accurate. And then the next question, the keyword there is to assess, and assess means to evaluate or estimate the nature, ability or quality of. So obviously when we're looking at the questions, it's important of course to answer the question, but it's important to answer the question in the context of what the keywords are, and the keywords can change the context of the questions. So for example, if it says to explain means to go into more detail, so you don't use bullet points, you write in paragraph format. If it says to evaluate, well, evaluate means to weigh up means to look for the pros and cons. So it's important that you look for the keywords in the questions and ensure that you answer the question in relation to the keywords. The suggested layout in the assignment format really starts off with an introduction. What is particularly different about the nature of the tourism and hospitality industry that makes human resources harder to manage. So what's the nature of the human resource tourism HRM in the tourism and hospitality industry? We're going to look at that. What methods are helping resolve these characteristics of the industry? Okay, we're going to be looking at hard and soft methods of human resource management, and we're also going to be looking at best practice and best fit. Critically assess the strategic contribution of human resource management to business success. Why is human resource management important to the strategic business success of hospitality organizations? Here we're kind of talking about SHRM, strategic human resource management, and we're really linking in to the strategy of the whole organization, kind of linking in hard as well, hard and best fit practices to SHRM. What difficulties are there in balancing strategic goals and employee goals? Here is some of your own analysis, looking at the industries, giving specific examples of saying, what are the difficulties in balancing, strategic human resource management in terms of the goals of the company to the goals of the employee. Next question, how does employee performance impact on the pursuit of strategic organizational success? We're talking about performance management here and performance appraisal, and how does these concepts impact on organizational success? Next question, what are the current ways forward for recruiting and retaining? Here we're going to be looking at some different ways that you should be considering for recruiting, and also looking at the pressures and the reasons why people leave, and aiming to reduce that retention, to reduce the retention, high level of retention. Next question, what are the requirements of quality management schemes in methods of recruiting and selection and retention? So here we'll be looking at total quality management, continuous improvement, just in time, benchmarking, and quality methods that could be applied to tourism and hospitality industries. So that was the suggested layout in the assignment brief. So when we're looking at human resource management, the question is always, who do we need? How many people do we need? Why do we need them? What do we need them to have? Where are they going to go? Which departments? And when do we need them to start? So these are all the questions HRM need to struggle with, and then taking into consideration they need to get the best out of their employees, and also maybe SHRM linking it to the overall company objectives. Before we start, let's just recap and understand that we are talking about hospitality and tourism industries, and there is a difference between hospitality and tourism. If we can see here, hospitality includes pubs, bars, nightclubs, contract food service providers, membership clubs, events, gambling, tourist sectors, visitor attractions, youth hostels, holiday parks, self-catering, but not necessarily travel services. That's part of tourism industries. Additional tourism parts of tourism industries include the retail travel agent, insurance companies, the ground transport, to and from the airport, at least two sets of airport handling agents, outbound and return, the airline on all legs of the journey, immigration and customer services, local ground transportation. So we can see here that there is a difference between tourism and hospitality. And so when we talk about tourism and hospitality, I know we talk about them as being one, and obviously yes, they are interconnected, but they are different in terms of the industries and the type of companies they kind of target. We're going to look at some definitions of human resource management. One, by Boxall Purcell 2003, all those activities associated with the management of employment relationship in the firm. Quite a wide definition. Definition by Watson 2010. Human resource management is the managerial utilization of the efforts, knowledge, capabilities and committed behaviors which people contribute to. Coordinated human resource expertise as part of an employment exchange or more temporary contractual agreement to carry out work tasks in a way which enables the enterprise to continue into the future. So this is a more specific in terms of going into detail into what's actually required. Some of the goals of human resource management, to support organisation in achieving its objectives by developing and implementing HR strategies that may be integrated with the business strategy. And so here we're talking about SHRM, Strategic Human Resource Management, linking it to the mission, vision, aims and objectives of the organisation, and how does the HRM activities, how are they influenced by this, and how is it integrated as well. Contribute to the development of high performance culture, ensure organisation has the talented skills and engage people it needs, create positive and trusted employment relationship between management and employees, encourage ethical approach to people management. So there's loads of goals of human resource management, and the question is, what do these all lead to in terms of HRM? Well, these lead to trying to either see employees as a hard fit or a soft fit in terms of a complete asset of the company, an asset to be utilized and to get more productivity. But either way, what we're trying to do with the human resource management influencing on the employees of the organization is to increase the productivity, increase their efficiency, to try and reduce costs, but also if we're taking a soft approach, trying to look at the well-being and to get the best out of the employee, maybe to unleash their creativity, really to get the most out of the employee as the most valuable asset to the organization, and thus leading to increased profits and a competitive advantage over other companies. So that's what we're ultimately striving for. So let's look at the nature of the tourism and hospitality industry, and look at some facts and figures and compare these to the UK general industry as a whole. So we can see that the vast majority of young people are actually employed within the tourism and hospitality industry between the ages of 16 and 29, which represents 46%. If we compare this to the rest of the economy in the UK, that represents 24%. So we can see we have a higher number of young people in comparison to the rest of the economy in the UK, with regards to younger people between the ages of 16 and 29. We can see, according to this research, the different researchers which states different things, that there are more females working in the tourism and hospitality industry as opposed to males, 51% to 49%. In comparison to other industries as a whole in the UK, we see that there are more males, 53%, as opposed to 47% of females. And likewise, in the tourism and hospitality industry, 57% of managers, even though there are more women in the tourism hospitality industry, 57% are managers are men, directors and seniors are male. As opposed to the rest of the economy, you have more male managers, directors and seniors, with 66% as being male. Likewise, if we look at the number of EU workers, migrant workers from EU countries, we can see from this industry, the tourism and hospitality industry, it's about 45% in comparison to the rest of the economy of 42%. And if we look at the makeup of the people in terms of migrant workers working in the tourism and hospitality industry, approximately 24% work in this industry in comparison to 16% in the wider UK economy. From outside the UK, this is slightly different there. We've got from people working outside the UK, outside of the EU, it's 55% of those people working in the tourism and hospitality industry in the UK. But as opposed to the rest of the UK economy being 58%, of people working from outside the EU. Other sources, Wood 1997 describes so-called marginal workers, such as women, young workers, casual employees, students, relatively high number of part-timers, and migrant workers. And Wood talks about the example of UK women, which is different to the previous research, which says that 58%, UK women make up 58%, and this is from People First 2006. 58%. So we had two surveys, one saying 58% and one saying 51%. So either way, it's a lot higher than 47% of women working in the other industries in the UK as in general terms. More specifically, the hospitality sector is indicative of the broader sector of having a high proportion of part-timers. 52% of people working in the tourism hospitality industry are part-timers. If we compare that to other industries in the UK, that's 25%. And that's according to HTF 2003. And we also see that young people are prominent within this industry, which we've looked at before. They say that 37% of the UK total workers under 24 and 58% under the age of 34. So 58% under the age of 34, according to People First 2006, in this industry. And then, related to this point, a significant part of the tourism and hospitality workforce, consists of students, seasonal, migrant workers. Students are increasingly important segment to the labour market for hospitality and tourism organisations. Okay, they're very important because they're very flexible, and students and young people seem to be able to work longer and more hours, and are generally more flexible because they're freer. They don't have families necessarily to look after their young, and not necessarily married yet. Um, you know, Other kind of like characteristics of the human resource workforce in the tourism hospitality industry. You know, the people in this industry are prepared to work for, they do work for lower wages, and they are more flexible in their patterns of work. Canny 2002 makes this point. Um, and Curtis and Lucas 2001 describe this as a coincidence of needs between the employers and students. Even if we look at the ethnic minority workers, in the broader hospitality, tourism, and travel sector, it's 11%. Slightly higher than the broader UK industry in terms of 9.6%, according to People First, 2006. And the other significant factor is that the level of qualifications in this sector, we can see that only 12% of employees in the hospitality, leisure and travel tourism industry have a degree or equivalent, in comparison to the rest of the UK economy of 29%. And probably this is probably logical, taking into consideration you have a lot of young people, you have migrant workers, people from outside the EU, you have people who are students working part-time or flexible, working long hours, underpaid. So to a degree and to a sense, it does seem a logical conclusion that a smaller percentage of people in this industry have lower qualifications. Now, obviously, we need to look at the functions of, and just to do a recap of the functions of human resource management, and how these functions are applied to an organization will differ. And the degree of importance some of the subsections of these functions may be relevant or not to specific companies. So as a manager as a whole, the main functions of a manager to plan, organize, direct and control, and that goes for any manager really in any company, in any department. And then in the HR department, obviously you have different areas of responsibility, including procurement, finding the right people for the right time, for the right post at the right cost, development of those people, compensation in terms of job evaluation, wages, administration, bonuses, payroll, integration and motivation, collective bargaining, conflict management, participation of employees, job satisfaction, grievances, and also maintenance in terms of health, safety, social security, welfare schemes, personal records, personal research, and personal audits. So these are the functions and of HRM, but as a manager to plan, organize, direct and control these. And depending upon the approach of the company, whether it's a hard or soft approach, which we will come on to, and or best fit or best practice or SHRM, that will determine how these functions and how the sub elements within each function are actually used and the importance that they are given. So as we can see, we've kind of looked at the introduction, what is particularly different about the nature of the tourism and travel hospitality industry, and that makes human resources harder to manage. Well, what makes it harder to manage? You've got a high percentage of women, you've got more male directors or equivalents, you have less qualified people, for only 12% in comparison to 29% to the wider industry. You have migrant workers, low paid, long hours, and people aged between 16 to 29, 46% of young people, or if you looked up to the age of 34, according to People First 2006, then it's 58% of young people in this industry. So we can see that this industry is difficult to manage because of the part-time migrant EU workers, lowly qualified people in comparison to other industry sectors. So again, you need to understand who the people are working for this type of sector, and then to understand the needs to be able to best get increased productivity, or the most you can out of them. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to methods of helping resolve the characteristics of the industry, and here we're going to be looking at hard and soft, and best fit and best practice. So let's just when we're talking about in terms of a hard approach, let's just remember what the definition, or a definition, of HRM is: the design, implementation, and maintenance of strategies to manage people for optimum business performance. Okay, and that's from the CIPD. And when we're looking at hard or soft approach, a hard or soft approach, we've seen hard approaches taken by companies like Amazon and Sports Direct, and admittingly, these companies are doing very well. But on the other hand, there could be negative sides to it as regards to high staff turnover and you know and negative publicity, which could to a degree damage the reputation of the brand. When we let's look at hard versus soft, we can look at it as a hard boiled egg or a soft boiled egg. With a hard boiled egg, it treats the employee simply as just another resource of the business. you know Whereas the soft approach treats the employees as the most important resource of the business, and a source of competitive advantage, way to gain competitive advantage. On the hard approach, when we look at these resources, what resources do we need, how do we get them, and how much do they cost, and how do we use them more productively, and what methods and theories are we going to use? Tailored scientific approach as such. With the soft approach, how do you get the best out of your employees? How can you help give the business an edge? When we look at some of the key features of a hard approach, there are short-term changes in employees' numbers, recruitment and redundancy, minimal communication from the top down, motivation focused on financial rewards, linked to Taylor's scientific approach, which we've covered. Little empowerment or delegation, the taller organizational structures, and suits an autocratic leadership style. So, this is based on, this type of approach, Taylor's scientific approach, restructuring, looking at the tasks to be done, recoding the different tasks into the way they should be done, and then getting the right people to carry out those tasks, and then motivating those people with a reward package to meet certain standards. And we've seen this in many industries out there. The features of a soft approach, there's a strong two-way communication, competitive pay with performance-related rewards, motivation greater than non-financial methods, including empowerment, delegating, people feeling important. Here we're bringing in theories like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the Hawthorne studies, the importance of people being recognized and made to feel important. Focus on job design and job satisfaction, basically flatter organizational structures, and it suits a democratic leadership style. So, which is better? Well, it really depends. We can't say one is better than the other. I think it's really dependent upon the company, the industry, the environmental factors, and so on and so forth. If we look at the hard, more cost-effective workforce, possibly, particularly if labour is used efficiently. quicker decision making by managers because it's an autocratic type approach, but you have a higher absenteeism, higher, labor turnover, difficulties with employee retention, potential damage to business reputation, as we've seen with Amazon and Sports Direct. But even there are additional costs to higher absenteeism because for every 1% increase in staff leaving in the Marriott hotel group, they estimate it costs anything from $5 to $15 million, per calendar year. If we look at the soft approach, high employees costs, may leave business at a competitive disadvantage because you're spending more time, you're investing more time in these people, even in the recruitment process, a lot more time and setup. So it's going to cost more, definitely going to cost more. Higher levels of motivation and productivity. You can get higher levels of motivation and productivity. It's true to say that you get lower absenteeism, lower labor turnover, and high employee retention. So that's a good thing. So you're saving money there, and benefits to business or reputation. It's a great place to work. Again, other benefits to the brand image. So additional information on hard versus soft, as well as providing, a concise definition. Story 1987 also provided one of the earliest and most enduring attempts to recognize the different approaches between, HRM, hard. The hard version is seen as an instrumental and economically rational approach to human resource management, like we were talking before, as people are seen as an asset. In this view, people and management strategies are driven by strategic considerations to gain a competitive advantage, maximizing control while achieving the lowest possible labor costs. So you're maximizing your net profit by reducing your costs, by seeing the people as an asset and trying to maximize their productivity and efficiency. This approach is quantitative and calculative, and labor is a commodity resource, the same as any other. But on the other hand, the soft version is seen as a much more about adopting a humanistic and developmental approach to human resource management. If you looked at and you remember the Hawthorne studies, why people increased productivity in that case scenario was because they were made to feel important, because they were motivated, because they felt important. As a result, an organization's people management approach is likely to be more consensual and based on a high level of managerial commitment to employees, which is intended to lead to mutual high commitment from employees, high trust, high productivity, and so on. Employees are seen as being proactive, capable of being developed, and trustworthy of trust and collaboration. We can see the difference here between hard and soft. Now, if we look at the diagram here, hard human resource management, the employees and subordinate, are subordinates to managers. Workers are viewed as a cost, as we stated. There's a big financial focus. Emphasis on working efficiently, and getting the most out of your productivity. Rejection of industrial relations. On the soft side, humanistic thinking, workers are viewed as an asset to the firm, more concerned with employees' views, development of core employees, emphasis on employee relations, and employee involvement and commitment encouraged. So we're beginning to see a picture now of the difference between hard and soft. But you mustn't just think hard, it's too hard, or soft, soft is the right way to go, because it's not necessarily true that soft is the right way to go in every instance. So now we're looking at best fit versus best practice, and best fit is kind of linked to a hard approach. On one hand, the best fit school argues for an approach to human resource management which is fully integrated into specific organization and environment context in which they operate. So HRM, was offered by Schuler and Jackson in 1987. and he developed three typologies. So he's saying that if you've got a hard approach and you want to adopt a best fit approach for within this kind of hard approach, you really need to bear in mind the environment which companies are working through. And then they developed three typologies. They saw possible typologies as a company which has an innovation strategy, a quality enhancement strategy approach, or a cost reduction strategy approach. So we look at the innovation strategy. Organizations, adopting this approach seek to develop an environment where innovation is allowed to flourish. Given these characteristics, the type of HRM strategy, flowing from this approach is based on having a large number of highly skilled individuals who are likely to enjoy high levels of autonomy. Okay, so again, the innovation, you were looking for people who are innovative and creative, and so the HRM functions would need to be, adapted to meet this type of company strategy. The quality enhancement strategy, competitive advantages gained, where this points to certain HRM practices to support total quality approach. These practices include, encouragement of feedback, systems, teamwork, decision making, and responsibility being an integral part of the employee's job description, and flexibility job classifications. We have the cost reduction strategy. The cost reduction strategy, there are tight controls, minimization of overheads, and the pursuit of economies of scale. In the pursuit of increased productivity, in flowing from such a strategy, organizations may have a higher number of part-timers, seek to simplify and measure work via narrowly defined jobs, and encourage specialization and efficiency, and offer short-term results-oriented appraisal. Even, we see this in McDonald's. McDonald's have, a system where each member of staff is trained on every single station. If it's the fries, if it's the till, if it's the hamburger, a quarter pounder, even like people on a till, McDonald's will know. They've categorized this job a bit like Taylor's scientific approach, and then they have worked out exactly on any given day, any given time, what is the average number of people that will come through their store and actually want buy something. And so they know on average how many people a cashier should actually serve within that hour. And if they fall behind, then maybe corrective action needs to be taken. But if they far exceed that by X percentage, but then they will be rewarded by a cash reward, which would hopefully incentivize them and motivate them. The best fit approach really is relevant to a hard HRM approach. It's the emphasis, the contingent relationship or alignment between the organization's human resource policies and practices and its business strategy, in turn the external context of the firm. So we are talking about the hard approach being vertically integrated. If it's a tall hierarchical structure, autocratic type leadership styles, then the decision making is taken on a vertical integration basis. But we also are saying that with a hard approach, you also have got horizontal integration as well. Horizontal integration linking into the HRM policies and practices and what the functionality in terms of how they incorporate this into the business. You have life cycle models, emphasis the alignment of appropriate HR policies and practices from the various life stages of a business. And competitive advantage models, emphasis and alignment of the relevant HR policies and practices with generic competitive advantage strategies. Okay, so all of this is all trying to increase productivity, increase efficiency, and on your balance sheet to increase your net profit so you can reinvest that back into the company or to the shareholders, gaining you a competitive advantage. So, best fit or best practice, while arguments for best fit advocate a close fit between competitive strategies and human resource management, those in favour of best practice approaches to HRM suggest that, there is a universal one best way to manage people. Enhanced commitment from employees leading to improved organizational performance, high levels of service quality, and ultimately increases in productivity and profitability. Redmond and Matthews 1998 outline a range of HR practices from a soft approach. So from a best practice approach, which is relevant to a soft approach. Recruiting and selecting staff with the correct attitudinal and behavioral characteristics. A range of assessments in the selection process should be utilized to evaluate the work values, personality, interpersonal skills, and problem-solving abilities of potential employees to assess their service orientation, recruitment, and selection. With regards to retention and teamwork, the need to avoid the development of a turnover culture is, reducing the amount of people that turn over in the business and retaining them to achieve a higher retention rate is good, rather than a higher turnover rate, because that's going to affect your balance sheet. Okay. Especially in the tourism and hospitality industry. So the use of semi-autonomous cross-process and multifunctional teams. People like to work in teams. People like to feel motivated and to work with other people, especially in the tourism and hospitality industry, as it's very, very social because you're dealing with people all the time. With the appraisals, moving away from the traditional top-down approaches to appraisal and supporting such things as customer evaluation, peer review, team-based performance, and the appraisal of managers by subordinates. So this is a different way of being appraised and looking at other factors in terms of how this function of human resource management could actually be implemented and conducted using a best practice approach instead of a best fit approach. Generally all of these performance appraisal systems should focus on the quality goals of the organization and the behaviors of employees needed to sustain these. Training and development, the need to equip operative level staff with team working and interpersonal skills to develop their service orientation, and managers with a new leadership style which encourages a move to a more coaching style, a more participative style, a more democratic style, so people feel involved and listened to and motivated because they feel important. Again, linking back to the Hawthorne studies. Reward and quality, the need for a much more creative system of rewards, and in particular the need for payment systems to reward employees attaining quality goals. I mean, even if we look at Hertzberg's two-factor theory, and we say some of the likes and dislikes, people can be motivated and dismotivated. Motivated by the things that they are achieving, but dismotivated if they feel they're not getting the pay for what they deserve and what they've actually achieved. Job security, promises of job security are seen as an essential component of any overall, quality approach. So, this soft feel, this strategy goes beyond achieving, best fit, and it's about resource allocation to achieving stretch and resource leverage through emphasizing the importance of both tact, explicit knowledge, and the ability of employees to learn. So if we come back to the suggested layout template as provided in the assignment brief, we can see that we've covered the introduction in terms of the nature and difficulties within the tourism and hospitality industry, which we looked at the characteristics, we looked at percentages, and we compared that to other industry sectors in the UK. And then we looked at what methods are helping resolve these characteristics of the industry. And here we're talking about how we overcome, how we get the best out of people. So we talked about either adopting a hard approach or a soft approach, or a best fit approach, which is linked to a hard approach, or a best practice approach, which is linked to a soft approach. So we are talking about people. And there were so many people out there, and there were so many different people and talented people who want the same job. So the question is, how do you actually select these people? You know. So here we need to look at strategic human resource management, and we need to say, what is strategic human resource management? Strategic human resource management is not a service department. It's not just a soft skill set. It's not all about hugs and mugs. It's not about an isolated department where the company's clinic supply is kept. It's not about forms. And strategic human resource management is not just about people. Okay. So if we look at this, it's a philosophy applied of leadership that enables a learning to, link in strategic humor, synchronizes business goals with people via mindful approaches. It allows you to contribute to business success outcomes. So we're saying that we're linking the specific functions of HR contributing to specific and successful business outcomes. How are we going to do this? Strategic HR holds the organization accountable to its values and maintains, the humanity of the organization. So we're talking about here is linking to how you carry out the functions of, strategic or human resource management and their sub-functions to either a strategic human resource management approach adopted for hard and best fit of practice. So we think about this, this strategic HR, anticipates trends and focuses impacts to inform long-term planning of the organization. It provides an organization with a competitive advantage. Talking about systems thinking about the company as a whole, personal mastery, mental models, shared vision, team learning, and it's how really you review the mission, aims, and objectives of the organization, and then implement the strategic approach of the organization, and then the functions of human resource management. So a strategic human resource management approach. Let's now look at a model of SHRM. The sequence of strategic human resource management. Before this model, obviously you would have the mission, the division, mission, aims and objectives of the organization, and then you would need to go through the sequence of analyzing the market environment. What is happening, what is good or not bad about it, what are the issues, what are the problems, what are the business needs, and then diagnosing, what do these, why do these issues exist, what are the causes of these problems, what factors are influencing the situation, PESTEL, the political, environment, technological, social, legal elements of the PESTEL. Then your conclusions and recommendations. And then this links into action planning. What actions do we need to take to implement, the proposals? What problems may we face, and how will we overcome them? Who takes the action and when? And then resource planning. This is where it leads into strategic human resource management. What resources will we need? Money, people, time. How will we obtain these resources? How do we convince management that these resources are required? And it's specifically of people here that when the human resource management department links into the overall strategy of the organization to say exactly what is it that the company is looking to do, where are the company looking to go, and then how are we going to contribute, getting the right people at the right time with the right abilities to help the company get where they want to go, and then what approaches are we going to adopt? Hard approach? Are we going to adopt a soft approach? How are we going to tackle this? What approaches are we going to adopt to get the best out of our people, either to convey a competitive advantage or competitive advantage through increased productivity and efficiency? So what approach are we going to adopt? And then the benefits of these. What are the benefits, to the organisation of implementing these proposals? How do they get the benefit, of individual employees, and how do they satisfy, business needs? Okay. When we look at strategic management, we have to bear in mind three factors, and that includes the context, being the key determinants tailoring best fit, the components, the core priorities and responsibilities, and the capabilities, implement people and management strategy. If we look at the context, increasingly rapidly shifting external environment appears to be driven in both the more stakeholder business strategies and highlighting the importance of a strategic approach to people management, taking into consideration environmental factors. In terms of the components, focused on how people are managed in the employer and, in other areas of the HR function and its work. Capabilities, focus on line managers and their people management capability, by the HR function is common to all, case studies. So when we see the focus of SHRM, Strategic Human Resource Management, we can see this is on a vertical integration and alignment between HR strategy and business strategy. So you see it on a tall hierarchical type structure, autocratic structure, where it's passed down from top to bottom. But HRM has been modified by consideration of the horizontal integration of HR practices, with an integrated bundle, shown in many research studies to have a potential powerful impact on 10 strategic HRM in practice on performance. Okay, so we're seeing it as a vertical and on a horizontal basis in terms of linking in the human resource management function. So here we got the functions as well again, the different functions which will link in to the overall goals and how we get the best out of people by either taking a soft or hard approach, but also how you motivate people, or if you're taking a hard approach, how you actually increase their productivity and efficiency. What systems do you put in place? So if we go back to this layout then, so we kind of looked at critically assessing the strategic contribution of human resource management to business success. So you need to talk about here the SHRM, Strategic Human Resource Management process. What is, SHRM? And then, looking at the difficulties in terms of balancing strategic goals and employee goals and giving specific company examples. So the next question we're looking at, which says, how does employee performance impact on the pursuit of strategic organizational success? So here we're looking at performance management and, how we manage performance management. Now, we can sometimes think of performance management versus performance appraisal, but performance appraisal actually is one of the elements of performance management. And when we think about performance managing employees, if you think of the two words, performance management of an employee and their performance, and how we manage that, set the targets, and try and increase their performance, or at least meet the minimum standards. So, things included in the performance management will include, object setting and reviews, personal development plans, career management and succession planning, coaching and mentoring, competence assessment, performance-related pay, self-appraisal, 360-degree appraisal, subordinate feedback. So you look at all these elements and you say there's a lot of elements related to performance management. But again, the question is, why do you need these elements? These elements are there. So these factors and these elements are important simply because they contribute to the motivation of an employee. And if someone is motivated, the question is a happy worker a productive worker, or a productive worker a happy worker? I kind of think that a happy worker is a productive worker, and if someone is motivated using these techniques, then they're most likely, or more likely, I would suggest, to be more productive and more creative. And if someone is more productive, more creative, then they're adding greater value. They're going above and beyond their normal hours. They're doing more than what they want because they're motivated. They're enjoying doing what they want to do. But equally, on the other hand, if they are demotivated, then that could demotivate them and then decrease productivity. For example, my one of my sons works for Direct Line. He went on a graduate training scheme for 3 years, and he was on a certain salary, and he got through the graduate training program. And normally, when you get through the graduate training program, your money tends to jump quite high. And my son felt he had done very, very well. He was doing in data. He was on a data analytical department, and he was doing all sorts of different things. And his bosses and his management were happy with him. So at the end of the graduate training program, he only got something like a 10% pay increase, which he didn't think was in line with the industry standard, and hence he didn't feel important or recognized and slightly demotivated. So again, these things are actually important. If you are in a graduate training program or progressing, do you get coaching and mentoring? Is there someone to help you, and do you have someone to talk to? Do you have a personal development plan? Do you have a career plan? Do you have something to move towards? And these elements are important for performance management. And the question is, do a lot of HRM departments actually carry all these things out? Yes, I'm sure they cover some of these things, but not necessarily all of them. And sometimes they are seriously lacking within organizations, I would suggest. But yeah, they are seriously lacking. When we look at the performance review meeting is important, because it's in that meeting which you will have, which will really set the scene for the next year. And within that meeting, there are 5 primary performance management elements which are important, which is agreement, to make sure that you sit down. You can't force something on someone. You need to come to some negotiation or some agreement where everyone understands exactly what you're trying to achieve and what you're heading towards, and it needs to be realistic and it needs to be achievable. Measurement, there needs to be feedback, positive reinforcement, and dialogue. So again, how the performance management meeting is carried out is also very, very important. Performance management cycle, we can see that this includes performance planning, performance agreement, acting, performance activities, carry out the role, implement performance improvement plan, implement the personal development plan, monitor, manage the performance throughout the year, see how someone's getting on, see if they're struggling, see if they're below standard, see if they need any help, coaching, mentoring, additional support. What do they need? Or are they not the right person for the job? Okay, review, job analysis and performance, dialogue and feedback, performance assessment, agree strengths and build on strengths, agree areas for improvement. And then the cycle keeps going round. It doesn't stop there. So this cycle keeps going and going. Okay. So when we look at performance management, it's really a rounded approach, If we look at performance appraisal, that should be part of a more rounded performance management approach. And it is, as I said before, it's a mistake to assume that performance management finishes, after you've gone round the cycle once. It's performance management is a never-ending cyclical process. And when we think about the objectives and what you're trying to achieve with performance management, it's all about obtaining or reducing costs, gaining competitive advantage for your firm, but also it communicates a shared vision throughout the organization, support leadership and management style, so everyone knows where they're going. It defines the individual requirements, thus reducing confusion and ambiguity. So you know exactly what you need to do and what you're going to be measured on. Provide a framework and environment for teams to develop and succeed. Okay. Provide the climate and systems which support, reward, and communicate how people and the organization can achieve improved performance. So you see where you're heading towards, you see what you need to do and how you need to get there. And helps people manage confusions. So when we look at performance management, there are 7. What do we mean by performance? What exactly what exactly are you going to be measured on? How do we identify a good or poor performance? What's the standard? What are the degrees and levels that you're aiming for? How do you know that you haven't hit it? What is good? What is bad? How can we establish the cause of good or poor performance? How can we motivate people, to perform well? And how do we deal with underperformers? How can we do this fairly and consistently? And how do we achieve, line manager buy-in so that the line managers actually agree to this? Because as the human resource management department, you're linking in to other departments and other people in different departments, and you're monitoring and you're appraising these people with performance management. So you obviously also need to get their line managers bought into this approach, and this is all important towards motivating people and people striving towards performance and going above and beyond that performance and achieving, and also being satisfied in their job and enjoying doing what they're doing. You tend to do more when you're enjoying doing what you're doing. You don't feel it or see it as work. And this all comes down to money, as we've said time and time again. It hits the bottom line in the profit and loss account. In the profit and loss account, it can either save money in terms of a hard approach, and it can increase productivity and creativity, gaining a company a competitive advantage. If we look at performance management objectives, from a findings from an E-Reward Survey 2005, we found from the survey, 46% found that they had aligned individual and organization objectives, performance management objectives. 3% they said that they had an improvement in terms of organizational performance using performance management objectives. 21% said they were informed and paid decisions. 32% said they had developed a performance culture, which was good. 46% said that there had been improved individual performance from these performance management objectives. 7% says this was a basis for personal development. So these are good statistics showing that performance management objectives in terms of carrying out the elements and carrying out the cycle can actually lead to other areas in terms of individual performance, developing a performance culture, improving organizational performance as a whole, and aligning the individual and organization objectives together, and a basis for personal development. So so these statistics show that it can actually work. So, when we look at job evaluation, so we're looking at job evaluation, we're saying, what are we looking at? What do we want to do here? And this is to provide an equitable, fair, and consistent and transparent basis for determining relative value of jobs to help in the management of job activities, to provide the basis for ensuring equal pay for work of equal values achieved, to provide a basis for the design and maintenance of a rational, and defensible grade structure. So, we have to look at the job, and we have to look at approaches for valuing a job, and this is necessary in order to determine how we're going to get the best out of the person. So how do we value a job? There are different ways to value a job. One could be an analytical job evaluation, a point factor rating or analytical matching. Decisions on a relative value or size of jobs are based on an analysis of the degree to which various defined elements or factors are present in the form of demands on a job holder. Or a non-analytical job evaluation. Okay, so job classification or ranking. So whole jobs are described and compared to slot them into a defined grade or place them in a rank order, or without analyzing them, into their elements. So we've got analytical, looking at the elements and then saying how people rank at that job interview on these different areas. And then we have a market pricing. Market pricing, here jobs are placed in a pay structure, entirely on the basis of external relatives, including market rates, a method of pricing jobs, but not job evaluation as usually defined. So approaches to valuing jobs: we've got an analytical approach, a non-analytical approach to job evaluation, and market. Some of the features of job evaluation, the features and the purpose of job evaluation is to maximize objectivity by basing judgments on a factual evidence rather than opinion. Here we're trying to aim to get consistency and really trying to get the best person for the job. Provide a framework of defined yardsticks to channel judgments. How do you make a comparison? How do you know you've got someone above the benchmark or below the benchmark that you should either discard them or move them forward? What are you basing your judgments on? And evaluate the job, not the person. Concerned only with the internal relatives, applicable only to analytical or non-analytical job evaluation schemes. So here we have like a factor plan, some of the tools. So you might say, if you are going for an analytical approach, you might use a factor plan and look at the elements of expertise, decisions, autonomy, responsibilities, and interpersonal skills. But obviously, depending upon the industry, you would have different elements in there, and then you could have different levels, and then you could give a scoring to these at the different elements, and then you add up all of these scores and you get a total score. And in that way, this analytical approach allows you to, if you've got a panel of people as well, allows you to compare and contrast different people with different scores from a less biased approach. So as we said before, the need to take either analytical, non-analytical, or other approaches is to kind of reduce the high turnover rates in the industry, in any industry, but typically in the tourism and hospitality industry, specifically because of the younger people, students, part-timers, migrant workers, and so on and so forth. So there's a high turnover of these people in this industry, and according to the Marriott, they estimate for every 1% increase in employee turnover, the company loses anything between $5 and $15 million annually in terms of increased costs to recruit more people. So this is a big cost on the administration cost in the profit and loss account of any company, reducing the overall net profits. So we're saying that prevention is better than cure. So prevention is better than cure. So we looked at different methods, and now we're looking at employees to increase retention and reduce the high turnover of employees. So some of the factors that affect the employees are going to be the work environment, managerial behavior, balance. If people are just working too many hours without getting a work-life balance, then how long can someone continue to do that for before they eventually leave? Management of stress. the possibilities of sexual harassment. Again, sexual harassment would be a demotivating factor, definitely, and someone would eventually either take legal action against the company or eventually leave. Managing stress, if it's too much stress, again, how much stress can any one person take for what period of time? Yes, you can take stress, and you can possibly take a lot of stress over a short period of time, but is that sustainable? I don't think so. So managing stress, very, very important. Any bullying tactics within the workplace, which would be a demotivating factor and would want someone to eventually want to leave. No one wants to work in that type of environment. So when looking at staff retention and turnover, we need to look at areas like these to say, what can we do with the work environment? What can we do with the manager behavior? Can we do something to have a better work-life balance? Reduce the stress on employees, sexual harassment and bullying. So, if we're looking at this, then, companies should act in a socially responsible way to provide a good quality of working life. Excessive stress causes illnesses. It can result in an ability to cope with the demands of the job, which of course creates more stress. And excessive stress can reduce employee effectiveness and therefore organizational performance, and eventually they leave anyway, therefore, having a higher staff turnover. Welfare relations, ghosts, 1994, illegal reactive welfare policy driven by legislative requirements, corporate conscience. How over time, this welfare approach became increasingly seen as a soft and indulgent, company paternalism, welfare policy driven by an encompassing approach, not just concerned about within the organization, but also about employees' lives outside. I actually think that's very important. I think you can get the most out of people to adopt that approach. But again, it depends on the type of employee, the type of role, the person, the company, and the external environment as well. Everything needs to be taken into consideration. So we've looked at different approaches one could adopt, and we've looked at the areas we need to focus on in terms of trying to increase staff retention and lowering staff turnover. Now we're moving on to the issues of quality management. So, the totality of features and characteristics of a product or service that bear on its ability to satisfy a given need, as quoted by Jones and Robinson, in terms of quality management. When we look at quality management, we're saying, what is the importance? Highly intensified level of competition in industry caused by globalization. We have low barriers, and so, in other words, how can we gain competitive edge? And one of the ways to gain competitive edge, as we've talked about in this throughout, is to reduce your costs, your administration costs in your profit and loss account. And one of the ways to reduce your costs is to become more efficient and more effective in what you do. So your systems, your processes, your practices, how you carry out your business can be conducted in the most efficient and effective way or not. And also with total quality management systems, are you actually improving? Are you learning from mistakes and learning how to do things in a better way? So, customer satisfaction as seen as a major indicator of good quality service. Environmental quality, natural beauty, clean atmosphere or water quality, crime levels can act as a major, attraction or an impediment, either way. So when we look at the challenges in tourism, we can see, the effect of external factors such as weather, transportation, product, service. The original, London sightseeing tour, highly subjective to, weather in London, whether it's a good weather or bad weather. The industry is, highly sensitive to a wide range of external shocks, such as economic crisis and the threats associated with the spread of various viruses, illnesses, threats of terrorist attacks. And haven't we just seen now with the pandemic, the airlines are shut down. Some of them are starting to come up again, but they won't be up to full capacity. In the UK, the restaurants are still closed, gyms are still closed, theatres are still closed. We've still got lockdown, and we still haven't had the easing of lockdown. And all these have affected the tourism and hospitality industry worldwide, but it's still affecting it heavily in the UK since March. So and we're said that we're going to go into a recession, hitting our gross domestic product. So this is going to affect everyone, and more younger people are going to be becoming unemployed. So definitely, when we look at the environmental challenges affecting this industry, hits this industry very hard. So, in other words, what kind of things can we use to try and assist us and help us to move forward and try and reduce our costs, gain a competitive advantage by becoming more efficient and effective? There are various techniques, including total quality management, Six Sigma, eco labels, International Organization for Standardization, ISO, the EU Foundation of Quality Management. I mean, ISO 9001 first came out in the 1990s, and it started off as BS 5750. I know that because the UK government had introduced legislation to make manufacturers meet a certain quality standard, certain quality level, and then retailers buying from manufacturers could only buy legally from manufacturers which had this quality standard, BS 5750 at that time. And we know we would have lost our biggest customer, Halfords, if we didn't have that quality standard. This later changed to ISO 9001, then changed to ISO 9002, and then went back to ISO 9001. So there are various schemes and techniques in here. So let's look at quality assurance. Quality assurance is the term used to describe those activities, which ensure that a contractually acceptable product is delivered by a project. In other words, a quality piece of product is one which, above all else, meets the customer's requirements. So BPP 2013, quality management, meeting the needs of customers. But again, you need to meet the needs of customers, otherwise customers won't be satisfied and they won't come back to you. Again, linked to a marketing definition of a mutually satisfying exchange at a profit in the long term, where the customer has to be satisfied with the quality of the product that they believe that they are buying. We have quality circles, that can be used in total quality management. Groups of employees meet to regularly solve problems, trained in planning, problem solving, and statistical methods. Often led by a facilitator, very effective when done properly. I mean, quality circles also linked to continuous improvement and different levels of continuous improvement, levels 1, 2, and 3. Benchmarking, determine what is the benchmark. Form a benchmark team, identify benchmarking partners, collective and analyze benchmarking information, take action to match or exceed the benchmark. Very important here. I mean, benchmarking, I think, should be implemented in all industries and all businesses, to look at what is the acceptable standard, and then to compare if you're falling below those standards or if you're increasing those standards. Even in companies like Marks and Spencers, I know someone who works in Marks and Spencers, and they relay a department. If they relay a department with new goods coming in or a new merchandising plan, then how long does it take to do an overnight move to relay a department? Or if you're relaying it during when customers are in, how long does it take, or how long should it take? Is there a benchmark? One person I've seen can take 1 to 2 days. Another person I've seen can do the same department with the same stock in 2 hours. Well, why is that the case? And why hasn't there been a benchmark? And those people not taking to, why isn't there a benchmark? And why hasn't anyone recognized if people are working too slow? And why are those people working too slow? Is it because they can't do it? Is it because they haven't been trained? And how do you get them up to a quicker level so that they're more productive and more efficient? Because if someone is taking 2 days and someone is taking 2 hours, then how on earth does that make any sense? Then the people taking 2 days are far less productive. So again, learning lessons there. just-in-time production. Just-in-time manufacturing is a production model in which items are created to meet the demand, not created in surplus or in advance or need. The purpose of JIT production is to avoid waste associated with overproduction, waiting, and excess inventory. 3 of the 7 waste categories defined in the Toyota production system known in North America in the lean production model. So, what Toyota tend to do is they've kind of developed partners with their suppliers, where the suppliers only supply Toyota. They don't supply other companies with their component stocks, and they make their component stocks according to what and the specification that Toyota want. They also deliver the number of components on a specific day at a specific time within a certain marginal error to deliver that stock, that component stock for any quantity and different types, so it goes straight into the production line rather than into the warehouse. And then at the same time, those component parts, once sent to the production line, are actually put on the cars or models at that time. So therefore, you don't need a warehouse. You don't need warehouse manager. You don't need stock controls. You don't need the space and the rent and electricity and the people. You don't need all these associated costs. So your overall costs are reduced. But again, it requires great integration of partners. It requires great acceptance and great planning, and the implementation and integration of practices and policies and procedures of other companies linking into Toyota, and they're very, very successful at doing this. We've seen the same with JIT just in time with Zara. Zara started as one shop in Spain. They now have approximately 2,000 stores worldwide in over 100 different countries, and they're turning over 20 billion US dollars annually, and they've done that by various approaches and principles. One of them being JIT. One of them being to reduce the amount of time it takes from the identification of the fashion item from the catwalk or wherever to having it in the store. Normally, from the time that piece of outfit goes on the fashion catwalk, it normally takes 6 months to get it into the retail outlets. But Zara has managed to reduce that process down to 6 weeks instead of 6 months. And they've done that by vertically integrating backwards. So they vertically integrated backwards to about 85% of their suppliers, the manufacturing and suppliers. So then they supply their stores with the quantity and stock that they need at any given time. And then once it's gone, and there's no overstock. So again, Zara has been very, very successful using as one of the elements and what they use JIT. We have total quality management, and we have various tools in total quality management. Tools for generating new ideas, tools for organizing data, and tools for identifying problems. And we should be using these tools. But obviously, this needs to come and it needs to be believed in total quality management. It needs to be a belief, because you can't just do these things, because it requires change, and people predominantly do not like change. So it needs to come from top management, and it needs to become part of the organizational culture of the organization to want to do these things and to want to make change and to want to have increased performance and productivity. It has to come from higher management. We have, check sheets, tools for generating new ideas, check sheets to find out, in terms of defective components, in what day, in what hour were the most defective products seen, and then maybe we can link this back to who was working at that time on this day at this hour, and why were there so many defective products at this time and this hour. What was the case? And so we can analyze it and try and look at this data and then reduce the amount of defects, therefore in reducing waste, therefore reducing items being sent back and received, and therefore reducing dissatisfied customers if they get more defective products. Scatter diagrams Cause and effect diagrams. If this happens and this material is out of stock, how is that going to affect manpower or machinery, and so on and so forth? As one, analyzing what factor affects another. So if one factor can seriously affect another, making sure that there's not a problem with the first factor in the first place. If we look at tools for organizing data, we've got various tools including Pertro charts in terms of organizing data, and even flow charts in terms of critical path analysis with your nodes and your estimated time that each function would take, and then the following function would take, and then estimating the time that function should be completed so that the overall time is also met, but also trying to analyze critical path analysis to determine the most efficient and effective way to get that project, that task completed in the shortest period of time. We've also got tools for identifying problems, and these including histograms, and then you can see what is the average, and maybe you have a standard deviation between the average. So if it deviates, say if you gave a percentage of 10% standard or 5% standard deviation, where things can fall either way, then if it falls outside that, then looking at what's actually happening and why it's happening. Got statistical process control charts to look at the target value, and the upper limit and the lower limit of the target value, and to make sure that you're well within these tolerances. And if you're not within these tolerances over that period of time, then what's happening and why aren't you within these tolerances? So we can relate this to the tourism and hospitality industry, such as seeing with the service industry. So if you had an organization like the Olive Garden restaurant, what is going to be inspected? The busboy, waiter, and then the standard. What is the standard? But obviously you'll have more complicated service inspection sheets there, of a department store, service industry inspection, a hospital in terms of the billing, pharmacy, lab, nurses, admissions, again setting the standards and seeing if these standards are being met. We've covered a lot today in human resource management in the tourism and hospitality industry, and I hope it's been informative. We have looked at the key questions, and we've broken these key questions down and looked at the keywords. We've looked at definitions of human resource management and linked these to the goals of human resource management, and we've reviewed the task in the assignment brief. Okay, we've related these to case examples. We've linked it to the characteristics of the tourism and hospitality industry. We've looked at hard and soft approaches to human resource management and best fit and best practice. We then moved on to SHRM, strategic human resource management, and then the implications of strategic human resource management, which you need to do in terms of your analysis, providing company examples. We have looked at various case examples in terms of performance management, performance appraisal, retention of employees, and how to decrease people leaving and maintain retention levels. And we've looked at the job analysis in terms of how you analyze the job, and then we've looked at total quality management. And then we have finally your conclusions. So I hope today has been informative. Many thanks from Mr. Tan.